Shabbat Shalom. Shana Tova. Good morning, everybody. The sun is shining and the air is clear. It's the first day of the new year. Let's bring in some beautiful intentions and prayers and hopes and wishes. We're going to start with the text on page 108. Hareini mekabel or mekabelet alai mitzvat haboreh. Here I am, ready to take upon myself the sacred charge of my Creator. Love your neighbor as yourself. Hareini mekabelet alayet mitzvat haborei ve'ahavta lareacha kamocha lareacha kamocha. Hareini mekabelet alayet mitzvat haborei ve'ahavta lareacha kamocha lareacha kamocha. Hareini mekabelet alayet mitzvat haborei ve'ahavta lareacha kamocha lareacha kamocha. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to all of the members of our community who are out there close, and to all of you who are joining us for the first time this morning. It's really a unique and beautiful thing that we can have so many people that we don't know across the world, across the country, join us for services in a way that isn't possible when we're all in our own shul communities. So it's wonderful to have you all here with us. I'm Rabbi Jennie Chabon. I'm joined on the bima by Lisa Zeiler and Elizheva Hurvich, and we're so honored and excited to be able to guide us all through some celebration and prayer and contemplation this morning. We're going to continue on page 110. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. How lovely is this beautiful tent. It's a blessing to be here.
Oh, A poem for the birthday of the world by Marge Piercy. On the birthday of the world, I began to contemplate what I have done and what I have left undone. But this year, not so much rebuilding of my perennial damaged psyche, shoring up eroding friendships, digging out old stumps of resentment that refuse to rot on their own. No, this year, I want to call myself to task for what I have done and not done for justice. How much have I dared in opposition? How much have I put on the line for justice, for mine and for others? And when injustice shows up sliced and diced, where have I spoken out? Who have I tried to move? In this holy season, I stand self-convicted of sloth in a time when lies choke the mind and rhetoric bends reason to slithering, choking pythons. Here I stand before the gates opening, the fire dazzling my eyes as I approach what judges me. I judge myself. Give me weapons of minute destruction. Let my words turn into sparks. We turn now to page 132 for the Ashrei.
Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha Od Hallelujah Od Hallelujah Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha Od Hallelujah Od Hallelujah Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha Od Hallelujah Od Hallelujah Ashrei Ashrei Yoshvei Yoshvei Veitecha Od Hallelujah Od Hallelujah.
It's the opening of our service on Shabbat, on Rosh Hashanah. It's masterfully crafted, this liturgy of ours. And it's meant to ease us into the prayer experience. And all of these opening things that we sing are really just a welcoming our bodies, our hearts, our minds, our spirits, so that when we really stand in prayer, we're ready. And one of my favorite moments when we are together at St. Matthew is Psalm 150, with the whole room, Kol HaNeshama Hallelujah, all of the souls singing, shouting hallelujah. So we're going to do it anyway, and we're just going to have to feel you from across the world, from across the city, across the states, singing along with us. We're going to have to imagine the drum and the tambourine and raise up a joyful noise. Page 135.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
I feel a little better.
I feel better. Thank
Okay.
you.
Whew. All right. Rosh Hashanah is here. So at this point, Karen Smith, our marvelous director of education, is waiting in a Zoom room for any kids that have signed up for or are interested in participating in junior congregation. It's a service that's designed for kids that are K through 5-ish. But if you have younger kids or older kids who want to go and check it out, it's a kind of a crafty, homemade exploration of the themes of the holidays and make your own machzor. So she's waiting for those kids there. If you want to pop over to the Zoom, and she'll send everybody back to the live service when you're done. Page 138.
On this holiday, we are invited to imagine that we stand before the King. And this King, God, has a throne, but not one throne, two. One throne is the throne of chesed, of compassion, and the other is the throne of din, of judgment, of stern judgment. Just as our prayers invoke the God of compassion, of chesed, so too may our own compassion rule over our judgment. Turn to page 138 for Hamelech.
Adonai, el melech gadol batishbachot, el haodaot Adon הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך אל חי העולמים.
We rise for the Chatzi Kaddish on page 141.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה
Amen.
בעלמא דברך ירוצי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה.
בריחו.
בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ויאמרו אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל, אור רם ויוצר חיים, אורות מאופל, אמר ויהי. אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהר לאורו. ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות.
If you rose with us, you can be seated. We're continuing on page 146, Ahava Rabbah. This great, enormous, giant love that we sing about before we move into the Shema. The Shema is cushioned, it's carried on either side with love. And we receive this love from above. We have the Shema in the middle, and then we send it right back up with the Ve'ahavta, right? It's this kind of love circle that we engage in every time we chant the Shema.
Ahava Rabbah Avtanu, Adonai Eloheinu, Hamelech Gedolah v'tzera, Hamalta aleinu, ba'avur avoteinu, le'imotenu, shebatchu b'cha, shebatchu b'cha, Avinu malkeinu, v'telamtem chukei chaim, ken tehonenu utlamdenu, Avinu av harachaman, hamerachem rachem aleinu, letein belibeinu lehavin, lehavin ulehaskil lishmoa, lilmod ulelamed, lishmor velasot, ulkayem et kol divrei Talmud Toratecha be'ahava. Ve'ha'enenu b'toratecha, v'tabek libeinu b'mitzvotecha, ve'yached levavinu le'ahava ul'ira et shemecha, ve'lo nivosh, ve'lo nikalem, ve'lo nikashel le'olam ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה, נגילה ונשמחה, ישועתך. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה.
את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Page 163. Remember the stories of slavery, and you will never stop working for freedom. Remember their fear at the edge of the sea, and self-doubt will never defeat you. Remember when desperation turned to celebration, and you will never let go of hope. Remember the words of the Baal Shem Tov. Forgetfulness leads to exile. Remembrance is the secret of redemption.
Mi chamocha b'edim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, norat tehilot, osefele, שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמחה על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו יהודה וישראל, גואלנו, אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל. ברוך אתה, אדוני, גאל ישראל.
We're going to move into the Amidah for this morning. The first two blessings are said out loud, and then things change very differently from what normally happens on Shabbat, right? So there's a lot of familiarity and similarity to Shabbat until we get to this moment, and then there's a lot of the intensity of Rosh Hashanah that gets inserted into the liturgy. But we're going to start with a familiar melody, and we like to add the English when we do it Rosh Hashanah morning. It was written for the Adonai's Fetai, and the words speak perfectly to the questions of what we're supposed to be asking ourselves this year at this time on the first day of the year as we're walking through the doorway through these 10 days, So the English says, am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Is God listening to our prayers? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? Those are the questions, friends. Please rise.
Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? Adonai, sifatai tiftach, ufi yagid tehinatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, v'Elohei avoteinu v'imoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Mekonei Hakol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, ורודפנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה קולתה, רב להושיע.
seated.
On Rosh Hashanah it is written, and on Yom Kippur it is sealed, who shall live and who shall die? Who by fire and who by drought? Who on the front lines and who alone? We are called in this hour to consider our own mortality, not to inspire fear, but rather to remind us of the preciousness of this life, of this time. This prayer comes to teach that each of us has the capacity to do acts of loving kindness, no matter where you are or what your circumstances. As long as we live, each breath is a prayer and a testament to our lives. As we listen to the Unatana Tokef, to this prayer, as we listen with our lives in the balance, may we make this day holy and this day count. May we remember that our lives are holy. You can find Unatana Tokef on page 174.
Unatana Tokef, Kedusha Hayom, Ki hu nora ve'ayom, uvot inaseh malchutecha, v'kon b'chesed kisecha, v'teshev alav be'emet, emet, emet, ki ata hu dayan mochiach, v'yodea voed, v'choteh v'chotem, v'sofer u'moneh, v'tizkor kol hanishkachot, v'tiftach et sefer hazikronot, u'me'elav yikareh, v'chotam yad kol adam bo. Rosh Hashanah יקטבון, וביום צום כיפור יקטמון. בראש השנה יקטבון, וביום צום כיפור בראש השנה יקטבון, ויום צום כיפור יקטמון. כמה יעברון וכמה בראש השנה יקטבון, וביום צום כיפור יקטמון. Hashanah ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון, בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור בראש השנה ייכתבון, מפרש וממגפה, בראש השנה ייכתבון, מבחניקה ומבסקילו, בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון. מי ינוח ומי ינוח, מי ישקיט ומי יטורף, מי ישלב ומי יתייסר, מי יעני ויעשיר, מי יושפל ומי ירום, ותשובה ותפילה וצדקה מעבירים את רוע הגזירה. We're going to continue on page 184 with the Kedusha. Please rise. Kaddish, Kaddish, et Shemecha ba'olam, Kaddish, et Shemecha ba'olam, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום. ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש. Ata, our God, your praise shall ever be on our lips, for your power is boundless. We're going to continue with a silent Amidah, silent prayer, silent meditation, whatever that means for you this morning, with the Hebrew, with English, standing, sitting, quiet, out loud, dancing. This is your moment to sink deep into your Rosh Hashanah morning prayer.
Sim shalom, sim shalom, sim shalom, tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha. Sim shalom, sim shalom, sim shalom, tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha.
ברכנו אבינו כולנו כאחד באור פניך, כי באור פניך נתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו.
Sim shalom, sim shalom, sim shalom, sim shalom, sim shalom, tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha.
תורת חיים, תורת חיים, ואהבת חסד,
וצדקה וברכה ורחמים וחיים ושלום. שים שלום,
שים שלום,
שים שלום,
שים שלום, שים שלום, טובה וברכה,
חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל. בכל עת ובכל shalom tova uvracha, chil v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha.
Baruch atah Adonai.
Hamevarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom. Sim shalom, sim shalom, sim shalom.
Am I good? I want to send out my greatest thanks to Lital Abrahams, who grew up in this congregation, who sang on that with me. She came into the recording studio, and we recorded 2 pieces to be able to create some harmonies that we miss so much, and some beautiful visuals too. So, Lital, you're a star. You're an incredible human and a beautiful singer, and you're a great light. So thank you so much for bringing that to our service. We're moving into Shofar, friends. Hopefully, most of you have these Shofar booklets. If you do not, Shofar is going to actually go back and forth between us live on the bima and pre-recorded. The actual tekiah, all of the calls are pre-recorded with our amazing Baal tekiah, Larry DeLoe. So if you don't have it, you also don't need to worry, because you're just going to have the experience come through regardless. We pieced together the shofar service in our machzor is spread out throughout the morning, and we kind of pulled it all together. So just a couple of notes about the sounds of the shofar. Tekiah, this strong sound of triumph and joy and happiness, is the first thing we hear. Shavarim and truah are broken notes, right? It's not one solid. They're broken slowly, and then they're broken quickly, many breaks. You know, and one question is, why do we bring all that together? Why don't we just have songs of triumph on Rosh Hashanah? Because the sorrow and the joy are all intermingled in our lives, always, and especially right now. Nothing is permanent. And in times of gratitude and joy, really dive into that, because you know on the other side there is sorrow that's possible. And in times of sorrow, take heart that the joy is on the other side too. And so this is an amazing moment of fulfilling kind of the fullness of humanity when we hear the shofar blown. So we begin with the Great Aleinu, it's called. It's the regular text of the Aleinu, but when we do it before shofar, we prostrate. So we're going to do that on the bima, as we always do. I'd like to ask you to rise and then just stay standing, because we stand whenever the shofar is blown. So we're starting on page 1 of our booklet, if you have it.
Aleinu leshabach L'Adon hakol, latet gedula, leotzeh bereshit, shelo asanu kegoyei aratzot, velo samanu kemishpechot ha'adama. שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגורלנו ככל המנם. ואנחנו קוראים משתחווים ומודים. לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Dwell on each sound of the shofar. Contemplate its meaning. Tikvah, one whole note. Shvarim teruah, 3 broken notes, 9 staccato notes. Tikvah, 1 whole note.
My return to the right path has the power to make me whole again. Tikvah, once I was whole. Shvarim teruah, in the wear and tear of living, I became broken and shattered. Tikvah, my tshuva, my return, has the power to make me whole again.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. תקיעה שברים תרועה תקיעה תקיעה שברים תקיעה תקיעה תרועה תקיעה.
The prophet said, "Cry aloud, lift up your voice like a shofar." This is the meaning of the verse. See yourself as a shofar, as an instrument of the divine. Do not take pride in your virtue or power, or the power of your deeds. With every mitzvah you do, every act of intellect, goodness, and love, God's Spirit breathes through you.
תקיעה שברים תרועה תקיעה תקיעה שברים תקיעה תקיעה תרועה תקיעה. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, תקע בשופר גדול לחירותנו ושנס לקבץ גלויותינו, וקר פזורנו מבין הגויים, ונפוצותינו כנס מירכתי הארץ, והביאנו לציון עירך, לציון עירך ברינה, בירושלים בית מקדשך, בית מקדשך בשמחת עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני, שומע כל תרועה Tekiah, Shivarim Teruah, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shivarim, Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah Gedolah.
Our endless gratitude to Larry DeLoe, the most extraordinary Baal Tkiya. I was just thinking, I had never thought about how we bookend the shofar service with this greater Aleinu, this Aleinu where we completely surrender, that if it's your custom to prostrate, that it's the same text, but instead of just bowing, we go all the way down to the floor. And then when this shofar blast, Ki Gedolah, happens at the end, I personally get filled with complete surrender and release, right? It just, that sound makes me feel like I can just give it all over. And it's amazing how so many of our pieces of liturgy are cushioned on either side, Shema and Torah, and now shofar too. I had never thought about it.
Avinu Malkeinu Shema Kolenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, hear our voice.
Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha.
We have strayed and sinned before you.
Avinu Malkeinu Chamon Aleinu Yalol Aleinu V'Tapeinu. Avinu Malkeinu Kalei Dever V'Cherev V'Ra'av Me'aleinu.
Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger.
Avinu Malkeinu Kale Kol Tsar Umastin Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror.
Avinu Malkeinu Kotvenu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived.
Avinu Malkeinu Avinu Malkeinu Kaddish Aleinu Shana Tova.
Renew for us a year of goodness.
לבדנו, כי אין בנו מעשים. עשה עמנו צדקה וחסד. עשה עמנו צדקה וחסד והושיענו.
We're going to turn to page 227 and begin to take the Torah out of the ark.
אין כמוך ואלוהים אדוני, ואין כמעשיך. מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. אב הרחמים, היטיבה ברצונך את ציון. תבנה חומות ירושלים, תבנה חומות ירושלים. כי בך לבד פתחנו, מלך אל רם ונישא, אדון עולמים. אדוני, אדוני, אל רחום וחנון, ערך אפיים ורב חסד ואמת. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'norah Shemo. Gadol Adonai iti, uneromema Shemo Yachdav. בשמיים ובארץ, כי כה בשמיים ובארץ. לך אדוני בממלכה, והמתנשא לכל לראש. רוממו, רוממו, אדוני אלוהינו, והשתחוו, והשתחוו להר קודשו, להר קודשו, כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו. רוממו, רוממו, אדוני אלוהינו, והשתחוו, והשתחוו להר קודשו, להר קודשו, כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו.
Wish I could ask how you're all doing out there, but I hope you're doing great. Hopefully everything is translating. I'm so excited for our Torah reading this morning because this was our great experiment of the holiday season. We had a very long day of recording pre-aliyot, pre-Torah readings. We have the most amazing people that came in and offered themselves and their chanting. So we're going to go back and forth, kind of toggling back and forth between live and video for the duration of the Torah service. And it's been one of these beautiful pieces of learning for all of us, and I think it's turned out incredibly beautifully well by some miracle of God, by some miracle of technology. So I just want to offer a little bit of insight about our Torah reading before we dive in. And it's not actually about this particular reading where I found the wisdom that I want to share. So our Torah reading this morning is Akedat Yitzchak, the famous binding of Isaac. And it's one of the most painful, difficult, contradictory, challenging pieces of Torah to read. And it really begs us to ask, how do we believe in and stay loyal to a God who is contradictory, who disappoints us, who makes mistakes, who enrages us? And in those questions, what does it mean to have faith? Right? This Torah portion is asking the question over and over again, what is the faith that's being demanded of us? And so I found an interesting midrash from Breshit Rabbah. The midrashim are these stories that add background and context to our surface stories. And Breshit Rabbah is a bunch of midrashim on the book of Genesis. And in Breshit Rabbah 3:7, it's talking actually about the creation story, which comes not that long before our Torah reading. It's very interesting what it offers because I think it gives us insight about Abraham and God. So in the beginning of the Torah, every time a day is finished being created, it says, Vayehi erev, vayehi voker, and it was evening, and it was morning. It doesn't say, it was evening, and it was morning. It says, and, at the beginning of it. So the rabbis, they love to pick apart every tiny little syllable. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Simon. Rabbi Judah bar Simon said, it doesn't say, Yehi erev, it was evening, but rather, Ela vayehi erev. Hence we derive, says Rabbi Judah bar Simon, that there was a time system prior to this. Rabbi Abahu teaches, this teaches us that God created worlds and destroyed them, saying, this one pleases me, this one did not please me. So let's go back and think about that for a second. So before the creation of the world, these rabbis are saying, in that one little vav, that they're deriving that before our creation story, God created world after world. and wasn't happy with them and kept destroying them, thinking that God had created perfection, but then realizing, oh no, that wasn't perfect either. Better destroy it. And then trying again. This is the world I want, and then destroying it again. God created and failed again and again until God got it right. But then, of course, the world that God did create, that we live in, was also imperfect, was filled with imperfection, and is filled with the stories of our ancestors in this book that are deeply flawed. So the perfect world God was looking for was an entirely imperfect world. So how does this offer us a little bit of wisdom about our own Torah reading? How do we praise a God that asks something so impossible of Abraham? Because maybe even God's decisions are fallible. Maybe we're seeing from this Torah reading, and we're seeing from this midrash, that even God, and we see it all over the place, in the Noah story, in the Tower of Babel, God creates and then wants to get rid of God's own creation. And so maybe we can have compassion, not just for Abraham and Isaac and Sarah and ourselves in reading the story, but even for God in having asked this of Abraham, in an understanding that all of the characters in our Torah are fallible and are imperfect. So let's see if that compassion can weave our way into how we read the Torah this morning. Our first aliyah is going to be chanted by Richard and Raina Ravitz. Ya'amdu Avrun ben Ishai v'Gittel v'Rachel bat Tevya v'Bracha liba la'aliyah rishona, and Maya Paul will be chanting.
Baruch hu Adonai hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam voed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher vachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayehi ahar hadavarim ha'ele veha Elohim nisa et Avraham vayomer elav Avraham vayomer hineni vayomer Kachna et bincha et yechicha asher havta et Yitzhak v'lech lecha el eret hamoria v'hale usam le'ola al ahad harim asher omar elecha. Vayashkem Avraham baboker, ve'havosh et hamaro, vayika et shnei nerav ito, ve'et Yitzhak beno, ve'vaka atze ola, vayakum vayele, el hamakom asher marlo ha'Elohim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chaye olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Yasher Koach, thank you so much. I can hear the Yasher Koachs from far away. Beautiful job. Our second aliyah, Jerry Levitas, is going to be chanting Torah. And Mark U. Satan has the aliyah, Ya'amod, Moshe ben Shimon, the aliyah Shniya.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam voed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Bayom hashlishi, vayisa Avraham et einav, v'yareh et hamakom merachok. Vayomer Avraham el neharav, shvu lachem po imach hamor, va'ani v'hana'a nelcha ad ko, v'nishtachave v'nishuv alechem. Vayikach Avraham et atzei ha'olah, vayasem al Yitzchak beno, vayikach biyado et ha'esh ve'et ha'ma'achelet, v'yelchu shnehem yachdav. Vayomer Yitzchak el Avraham aviv, vayomer avi, vayomer hineni vani, vayomer hine ha'esh v'ha'etzim, va'yehaseh le'olam.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emes, v'chayei olam notah b'tochenu, Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen.
Yasher Koach, friends, thank you so much. Our third aliyah is on page 240. We're going to be starting at verse 8, if you're following along. Judith Baral, our president, is chanting Torah, and Amy Lerner has the third aliyah. Ta'amod aviva eitana la'aliyah. Oh no, sorry, third aliyah, excuse me. Jeff and Bonnie Rockmill do the aliyah. Amy has fourth. Ya'amdu ya'akovu dvora la'aliyah shlishit.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayomer Avraham Elohim Yireh lo haseh leolah beni vayalchu shem yachdav vayavohu el hamakom asher amar lo ha-Elohim vayiven sham Avraham et hamizbeach vaya'aroch et ha'etzim vaya'akod et Yitzchak beno vayasem oto al hamizbeach mimala etzim vayishlach Avraham et yado vayikach et hama'achelet lishchot et beno vayikra elav malach Adonai min hashamayim vayomer Avraham vayomer hineni.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu, Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen.
Yasher Koach, our fourth Aliyah, Elizabeth Paul, will be chanting Torah. And this Aliyah, Amy Lerner, has the Aliyah, Ta'amod Aviva Eitana LaAliyah Revi'it.
Baruchu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayomer, al tishlach yadcha el hana'ar, ve'al ta'aslo me'uma, ki ata yadati, ki yirei Elohim ata, ve'lo chasachat, et bincha et yachidcha mimeni. Vayisa Abraham et einav, vayar v'hine ayil, achar ne'echaz basivach bekarnav, vayelech Abraham vayikach et ha'ayil, vaylehu le'ela tachat beno, vayikra Abraham Shem hamakom hahu Adonai Yireh, Asher vayimar hayom bahar Adonai Yireh.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam natan v'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Yasher Koach, Yasher Koach. Our fifth and final Aliyah is going to be chanted by Louis Polson, and I'll read from the Torah live and in person. Ya'amod Arya Gil ben Techia la'Aliyah Chamishit.
Baruchu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayikra malach Adonai el Avraham, shenit min hashamayim, vayomer binishpati ne'um Adonai, ki ya'an asher asita tadavar hazeh, v'lo chasachta et bincha et yechidecha, ki varecha varechecha, ve'arbar bet saracha kekochvei hashamayim, ve'kachol asher al sfat hayam, ve'yirash zaracha et sha'ar oivav, ve'yitbarechu ve'zaracha kol goyei haaretz, ekev asher shamata bekolim. Vayashov Avraham el Ne'arav, vayakumu, vayelchu yachtav el Be'er Shava, vayishev Avraham b'Be'er Shava.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Yasher Koach Lewis, who recorded that before he went back to college. So he had one of the early recordings but long before anyone came into this room, he recorded before he even left. So before we put the Torah away, we want to do a Misha Beirach. There are many, many in our community who are in need of healing. We're going to sing the Rifa'enu, which is a melody we only do at high holidays. Even though the text itself, God please heal us, is appropriate any Shabbat, any day, but this is a melody that we tend to only sing on the high holidays. So we're thinking this Rosh Hashanah, this Shabbat, of Susanna Wilkinson, Aviva Leah, Yetta Hurwitz, Borach Leib Ben Kashabella, Tom Ramsdale, David Connor, Susan Wisnadell, Harry Wittenberg, Spencer, Iris Kaplan, Malka Leah Bat Matilda, Rosalie Weiner, Stephen Cavalier, Josh Hurrend, Sophie Wasson, Stan Hurwitz, Pam Kleeman, Robert Schwartz, Steve Wolf, Leslie McDonald, Matt Samuelson, Stanley Franklin, Malka Batchaim Veadina, Marie Del Marl, Tiffany Casimir, Jeff Price, David Cohen, Liba Cooperman, Eileen Klatsky, Brandon Verona, Sarah Romov, and Avraham Ben Yaakov Rivka. If you have other names you'd like to add, you can put them into the chat if you want them to be public, or just send them up into the air as we sing the Rifa'enu. Amen. We pre-recorded Hagbah with Dan Laporte, our mighty Hagbah. So we're going to turn to a video to dress the Torah. We'll be dressing it here while he's lifting and dressing it on video. Please rise.
Vezot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai beyad Moshe. Di-di-da-nai, da-nai, 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 da-nai,
Yasher Koach. Thank you, Dan. That was beautiful. Yasher Koach. Oh, there have been lots of beautiful moments of levity and grace that we have all had to manage in this period. So normally at this moment we would be chanting Haftarah. I love this Haftarah. It's the Haftarah of Hannah, who desperately, more than anything, her heart's desire is to have a child. And she can't get pregnant, and she goes and prays so fervently that the priest mistakes her for being drunk, and he accuses her of being drunk. And it's this beautiful, heartbreaking expression of desire, and of course, at the end, she does get to have a child. But because we're in this unusual time and we want to save a little time this morning, we're actually not going to chant Haftarah. And so Elizheva and I were looking for poetry that would maybe speak to that heart's desire, to that journey, to us fulfilling what we're meant to fulfill in life. You know, when the prophets wrote the various Haftarot, they were speaking to the Israelites who had found their way away from Torah, and they were trying to get them back and saying that this path right here is a path that's going to make you a better person. It's going to make you closer to who you're meant to be. So we found a poem called Breaking Surface. And this, in lieu of our Haftarah this morning, hopefully will speak to the intention behind Haftarah every time we chant, but in particular, the story of Hannah. It's by Mark Nepo. Let no one keep you from your journey. No rabbi or priest, no mother who wants you to dig for treasures she misplaced, no father who won't let one life be enough, no lover who measures their worth by what you might give up, no voice that tells you in the night it can't be done. Let nothing dissuade you from seeing what you see, or feeling the winds that make you want to dance alone or go where no one has yet to go. You are the only explorer, your heart, the unreadable compass, your soul, the shore of a promise too great to be ignored. David Ratner, executive board member, vice president, recorded a prayer for our community that we'd like to play now.
A prayer for our community. Source of all being, creator of all life, may your goodness find its way into the hearts of all your children. May those who wield power do so with a balance of wisdom, justice, and compassion. May those who feel powerless remember their intrinsic worth and also act with the balance of wisdom, integrity, and compassion. May we all feel called to action based on the injustices of our racism and see ourselves not as enemies of one another, not in struggle with one another, but as human beings created in the image of God, connected to one another's well-being. May all of us come to acknowledge the racism that is pervasive in our region and in our nation. May we commit to sitting down with one another in honest dialogue, opening our hearts in compassion to one another, bearing witness to the pain and fear of one another, even if, and especially if, the other looks and seems so different from ourselves. May we commit to joining together in acts of justice that will bring about equality in education, economic opportunities, law enforcement, and judicial proceedings. May each of us come to understand that ultimately my experience of freedom and justice and peace is inextricably linked to the freedom, justice, and peace of every other person in our county and city, our country, and our world.
A prayer for Israel. Rock and Redeemer of the people of Israel, guardian of the covenant, bless and protect the state of Israel and all her inhabitants. Guard this good land established with liberty, justice, and peace as conceived by the prophets of Israel. Open the hearts and minds of the leaders of the nation to guide them in the paths of peace and justice with strength and wisdom. Strengthen the hands of those who defend and protect our holy land and crown their efforts with success, free from all oppression and fear. May the work of their hands be established and the words of your prophets be fulfilled. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor shall they learn war anymore. Amen.
Amen. On page 277, we rise to put the Torah back into the ark. Please be seated. Shana Tova, everyone. Over the past few weeks, we've been cleaning out bookshelves in our house. Judah is now 8 and reading chapter books. And as we contemplated a potential year of school from home, we realized that it was time to give away some old books. Lots of old books. We had shelves spilling over with sentimental favorites that never get cracked these days. Goodnight Moon, Sylvester and the Magic Pebble, Love You Forever. Books sitting on their sides, shoved in and bent, upside down, spines backwards. It was time to do a big clean out. But how do we choose what stories are worth holding on to and what stories need to be released? Which stories are no longer serving us, and which ones will we always hold close, even if we need to let them go? And when, as people, as families, as communities, is it time to write new stories to reflect where we are going rather than where we have been? I would argue that at a time of great change and uncertainty, which is undeniably where we find ourselves right now, we need to hold on to texts that affirm the shifting landscape of the human experience, texts that are about changing minds and perspectives, and to let go of any stories to which we cling too tightly. We need stories firmly planted in the gray wilderness of humanity, rather than in anything black and white, in order to find ourselves the answers to how we are meant to navigate the vast unknown that is America 2020. We have all found ourselves this year feeling like beginners at jobs and tasks that have for years been our expertise. So how do we move forward? How do we even begin to write new stories when we feel like we have no idea where any of this is going? As the great Elie Wiesel said, God gave Adam a secret, and that secret was not how to begin, but how to begin again. And so let's turn to the beginning of the Torah, again, as we always do, to Genesis 6 and the story of Noah and the flood. In this story, God realizes that the human beings that God created back in the garden were not so good after all. And God has a change of heart. Vayinachem Adonai ki asa et ha'adam ba'aretz. And God regretted having made human beings on the earth. Vayit'atsev el libo. And God's heart was saddened. What follows, of course, is that God destroys nearly all of humanity in response to this regret, in response to our great wickedness. Vayinachem, God regretted. But Rashi, the great medieval rabbi and commentator, flips the tables on this interpretation. He points out that the root for regret, nun, chet, mem, is the same as the root for comfort. Nachamu, Nachamu, the prophet Isaiah says, comfort, oh comfort my people. What is the connection between comfort and regret? The connection, Rashi says, is that within that regret, God's thoughts turned from divine mercy, from comfort at these beautiful humans who were created to keep each other company, to divine justice, to regret, to retribution. God's mind, God's perspective is changed in that moment, and the whole of Torah along with it. So what then is comforting about changing your mind? What exactly is Rashi getting at? He's suggesting, according to Rabbi Jan Orbach, that knowing is less comforting than learning, even for God. Or, put another way, that learning and changing our minds and opening up our perspectives is the way in which we reflect God's oneness in the world. The way we can best emulate God's presence is not to see the world in the way we always have, but to wake up and see when it's time to open our eyes and start reading new books and writing new stories, to find the comfort and regret and humility in the need to begin again. If there was ever a time for us to do that, the time is now. We are in a time of unprecedented, uncomfortable, catastrophic instability, the likes of which none of us has ever experienced before. And catastrophe is by nature terrifying. But it is also our inherited historical norm. We would not have the Talmud if the Second Temple had not been destroyed. We would not have our modern Siddur if sacrifices had not been eliminated. There is always rebirth after destruction, whether that destruction is literal, physical, or mental, whether lives are lost or perspectives are forced to change. No one welcomes catastrophe, but it comes to force us to reinvent our communal narratives. We are in a period of tremendous uncertainty and change, which is bringing out the worst fears and behaviors in many people. But what else, my friends, is also being birthed at this time? I would argue that we are also giving birth during this incredibly difficult period in our history to our power to rebuild the world. One person, one perspective, one narrative, one community at a time. So let's start right here at CBT. I've been serving this community for 17 years, and I have been proud of CBT throughout those years for being an open-minded, creative, and welcoming place, especially when it comes to interfaith families and egalitarian values. That foundation was laid down by our founding rabbi, Raphael Asher. More recently, we have done a much better job at being radically welcoming to queer people and families, recognizing the need to not just be welcoming by default, because we're a Reformed synagogue in the Bay Area, so of course we welcome queer folks, but by action and statements, by hanging rainbow flags and proudly naming our desire to have people of all genders and gender identities in our community. You are welcome here, no matter who you are or who you love. I love that about us. And slowly, but steadily, more queer people are joining our community because of it. I'm now going to share a statistic with you that was shocking to me when I heard it, because it laid bare one area in which we in our beloved community need to do some deep and serious narrative revision. Here it is. 12 to 15% of North American Jews are Jews of color. 12 to 15%. I want that number to sit with you for a moment. And as you sit, I want you to picture the sanctuary when it's full on the high holidays or at a typical sheer joy evening. Look around the room in your mind and tell me, are 12 to 15% of the people sitting next to you people of color? Because if the answer is no, which it is, then we are doing something wrong. And let's not jump to quick defenses, but there aren't very many people of color at all in Contra Costa County, let alone Jews. That may be partially true, but what is also true, if you listen to Jews of color talk about their experience of the North American Jewish community, is that they don't feel like they belong because we don't make them feel welcome. When we see a black or brown person walk through our doors, I challenge us to deny that our first assumption is that they are not Jewish. Because for most, if not all of us, that is what we assume. Why? When we see people of color, do we assume that they're not Jewish rather than assuming that anyone could be? Because that is the actual truth. Any person joining our community on any given day could be Jewish, no matter what they look like. But our Ashkenormative perspective has narrowed our vision of what a Jew is supposed to look like. White, with a certain last name, and of Ashkenazi descent. And even if we do have a moment of open-minded clarity, we assume that these people are Jews by choice, not Jews by birth. I bring this up today on the first day of the new year because, of course, our entire country is going through an awakening of tremendous importance around racial justice right now, an awakening that should have happened hundreds of years ago. And we, who sit in positions of white privilege, are just becoming woke now, to which, on the one hand, I say, thank God. Thank God my eyes are being opened now while I'm still alive and able to help write a new story for our community and our country. But on the other hand, this awakening leads to a much bigger and more disturbing question. The question is not just, what can I do now? Yes, we need to act. And yes, we need to ask how best to contribute to the solution. Vote, donate, engage in dialogue. But according to Ilana Kaufman, the executive director of the Jews of Color Initiative, we must first ask ourselves not what can I do, but why am I just seeing the systemic racism in our world now? Why am I only now beginning to understand my own white privilege when it has been here all along? For those of us just waking up now, says Kaufman in a fantastic episode of the podcast Judaism Unbound, the real question is, where have we been for hundreds of years? How do we reckon with our own accumulation of power and privilege at the same time that we grapple with the gravity of how absent most of us have been this whole time? Where have we been? Nachamu. Talk about sitting in our comfort and regret. Now, before we all jump into our defensive responses, let me take a moment to unpack the idea of what it means to be a liberal, open-hearted white person who holds racist views, which is what I am. I will say out loud that I sit firmly in that category. I am deeply uncomfortable here, and it is my white, privileged inheritance that I sit here. I'm a good person with unconscious bias that needs to be unpacked so that I can contribute to the fixing of the world. One of the unfortunate, unintended consequences of the civil rights movement, says Mia Birdsong in her excellent book, How We Show Up, is that it cloaked racism in the robe of the Klansmen and their brand of extremism. White folks get defensive when they're confronted with their racism because we associate it with segregationists and burning crosses. So let's just be clear here, she says. If you're a white person who grew up in America or any number of other countries, you benefit from white supremacy and hold racist views. That doesn't make you a bad person. None of us are all bad or all good. It does mean you have some work to do to reduce the harm racism causes people of color and to free yourself. We have some work to do, friends, to free us all. The irony, of course, is that as we welcome more and more interfaith families with open hearts and minds, out of a desire to cultivate a growing, flexible Jewish community, we are, by definition, also welcoming future generations of more Jews of color. And yet, we have failed to address the interracial piece of the Jewish puzzle. Interfaith, we've been comfortable with for decades. But what are we doing to ensure that the children of interfaith and interracial families feel comfortable growing up in our synagogues? 1 million Jews don't feel welcomed, Kaufman says. 1 million Jews we aren't seeing. If we label it racism, people get defensive. So do we label it racism? Ashkenormativity? So many Jews want to be welcomed into the community, and we aren't owning the ways in which we aren't welcoming them, even as we are desperate not to lose any Jews. What harm are we continuing to cause as it relates to racism? These are the questions that I challenge us to ask ourselves this year, the questions that lie at the heart of the new narratives that we have the privilege of writing together. Can we throw out the books that say, this is what a Jew looks like? That is not. This is what a racist looks like, and I am not a racist. What would it mean to deeply examine our communal story and to use this time of discomfort and change to write a new chapter for ourselves at CBT? A chapter that says we have a lot to learn, to own up to, if we want to be a community truly built on justice for all, not just for folks who look like us. A chapter that says we own the comfort we've been sitting in and the regret, just like God did, and that change must come from that gray and conflicted place. What would it mean to say that we are the agents of tikkun, of fixing what is so deeply broken within ourselves and in the broader world? Without community, there is no liberation, writes poet Audre Lorde, and to that I say amen. Community has the ability to liberate us because we hold each other accountable. But in order to hold a mirror up to one another, we have to discard many of the binaries that we cling to for comfort. Responsibility versus fault, right versus wrong, victim versus perpetrator. Mia Birdsong says it beautifully when she writes, we need to reach for grace as we weave in and out of what is me and what is you and what is us. Indeed, what is us? What kind of community do we want to become this year? And will you join me in getting us there? Knowing that his death was drawing near, the great John Lewis wrote a piece to be published on the day of his funeral entitled, "Together You Can Redeem the Soul of a Nation." His words call out to us today as we begin the work of redeeming the soul of this community and of our nation, as we find the courage to write a new narrative for ourselves that includes accountability and radical compassion. Though I may not be here with you, he writes, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. Amen, friends, and Shana Tova. May this be a year of transformation and everlasting love for us all.
Just as the world is changing, so are we. On page 286, the words of the Elena remind us that it is our duty to rise and to meet the challenges of the world. So wherever you are, in body, heart, mind, and soul, stand up and join us out loud in the Elena.
Aleinu leshabeach la'adon hakol, latet gedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kegoyei haratzot, velo samanu kemishpechot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני
Mourner's Kaddish is found on page 292. On this Shabbat, on this first day of Rosh Hashanah, we're in the period of Shiv'ah, in the first 7 days for Alexander Dunayevich. And Irina, Gary, and Michael, we're holding you close. And it's the yahrzeit this Shabbat of D.H. Bradshaw, Susan Joe Brooks, Rodney Cohen, Sarah Friedman, Jack Garfinkel, Jonathan Horowitz, Howard Kaplan, Star Kaplan, David Nathan Laporte, Max Lerman, Kevin Platt, Sidney Robinson, Irving Ruderman, Ruth Speckland, Karen Sweet, Kay Bernstein Tucker, Ruth Ellis Wise, Benjamin Zivian, and of course, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. A giant of justice, a giant of equality, a giant of a fighter who we lost yesterday. And her spirit calls upon us to fight for what we believe in this year of all years. So we bring her into our hearts as we recite the words of Kaddish. If it's your custom to stand, please do so on 292. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol bet Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru.
Amen.
Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah le'olam u'lomei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei dekudsha barichu le'ela ule'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru.
Amen.
Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru.
Amen.
Amen. You can have a seat, and I'd like to invite Ann Marks, our Executive Director, up to offer a few holiday-related announcements.
Rabbi Chabon, Elizheva, Lisa, and Irene, thank you for these beautiful services. Shana Tova. In case you were not with us last night, I'm Ann Marks. I'm Congregation B'nai Tikvah's new Executive Director. And on behalf of the clergy, staff, and Board of Trustees of Congregation B'nai Tikvah, I want to welcome everyone to our Days of Hope and High Holidays. From Arkansas to Australia to the East Coast, we're very glad to have you all here. We had a wonderful Tot service this morning, and I encourage you to register for next week's Yom Kippur Tot service. Some of you may want to join intergenerationally. Grandparents and village aunts and uncles can share this with their littles across the miles. Thank you to our Director of Membership and Education, Karen Smith, who helped put this and our junior congregation offerings together. A few other announcements. Our Tashlich services for tomorrow are full. Those of you who registered in the last 24 hours or so will receive location details, and anybody who's registered should watch email tomorrow to make sure that the air quality is doing okay. Around 11 a.m. we'll check in about air quality. We do have an ongoing food drive with Monument Crisis Center, so feel free to stop by anytime and drop off protein-rich foods outside. And join us for our Tikvah Takeout fundraiser, which continues on October 13th with Panera. So it's not too late to join us for religious school. If you are interested, you can still reach out. We have a hybrid going on of online and also outdoor in-person education. Most importantly, Yom Kippur. Kol Nidre is at 7:30 p.m. on Sunday the 27th. Monday morning, Yom Kippur main services begin at 10 a.m. and continue for Nila at 6:30. Tot and children's services will be just like today at 9 a.m. and 10:15-ish. And there will be one thing that's different on Yom Kippur. The afternoon Mincha, Avodah, and Yizkor services begin around 4, but those will be on Zoom. So it's really important that you make sure to use next week's links for next weekend. And those will be sent out to members and registered guests on Thursday. There's still time to invite your friends and relatives from around the world to join us. For Ni'ilah, if you have registered to come through for our afternoon Ni'ilah, you will get an email with your particular assigned time, and there are a few spots left. The last thing, please drop off your personal Vidui cards, which you might have gotten in your High Holiday at Home bag, and there will be this box outside waiting for you, so you can come by the synagogue. If you don't have that card, just put it on a piece of paper. And then Rabbi Chabon and Elizheva will be able to incorporate those in the Yom Kippur morning services as part of a community confessional. So no names, please. We do want that all to be anonymous. Again, thank you for creating our High Holiday community this year. Shana Tova, Tikatevu, V'techatemu, a good year, and may you be inscribed and sealed for a blessing in the Book of Life.
Thank you, Anne. 3 more thank yous. You can't see them, but we have an amazing sound and film crew here. Tina Solano, Irene Young, Alberto, doing an unbelievable job creating sound on the fly when hiccups happen. And beautiful pictures for everyone to see. So thank you so much. It's been a privilege to work with you all. We're going to close with a video of a song that I wanted to sing at the end of Rosh Hashanah morning, no matter what, long before COVID happened. And then when I realized that we weren't going to have our choir, the choir put together a gift for you all to be able to see their faces and hear their voices. So I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. Boy, is that true. And please, God, make it true this year. This is our choir offering our closing benediction song.
I will open my eyes.
I will open my eyes.
I will not look away.
I will not look away.
I will use this gift I've been given every day. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. Change the world. I will give of myself.
I will give of myself.
I will reach out my hand.
I will reach out my hand.
I will use this heart I've been given to take a stand. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. Change the world. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asanu b'tzelem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asanu b'tzelem Elohim. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. Change the world. I will fight for the truth.
I will fight for the truth.
I'll stand up for what's right.
I'll stand up for what's right.
I will use this strength I've been given to be the light.